and the date is Monday, March 26th. Welcome to the Town Council Chambers. If you would please join us to recite the pledge. Colleen, if I could ask you to do the roll call.
Council President Healy.
Here.
Council Vice President Collins.
Here.
Councilman DeCruz.
Present.
Councilman Veely.
Here.
Councilwoman Gledhill.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for the approval. Before we go on to the consent agenda, I will have somebody make a motion to move an item forward. But item number 4, I would like to ask anybody who would like to approve the work sessions of February 27th, March 5th, 6th, and March 12th, and the regular session of March 12th.
Make a motion to approve items 4A and B as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the consent agenda, which is item number 5, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. I would like, what's that? I would like to move forward to, I think it's item 8. I know, it's in the back. I want to move it to the front.
14L.
14L, which is
Aye. 14I.
I.
Sorry.
If nobody has any objections, I would like to move this forward, which is a resolution adopting a proclamation recognizing Lewis C. Northup for a selfless act of bravery. I know he's here. Can you come up, please? I don't want to embarrass you, but can you come up?
Too late.
Too late.
Thank you. And I'm going to read this. This is a proclamation for Lewis C. Northup, which we couldn't be more proud, truthfully. Whereas on February 13th, 2018, local resident and business owner Lewis C. Northup was driving along Route 1 South and came upon the scene of a serious automobile accident just south of Shannock Road. And whereas Mr. Northup saw that the vehicle had struck a tree and caught fire, Mr. Northup quickly determined that the driver of the automobile was in jeopardy of being injured. And whereas Mr. Northup and another unknown motorist who also stopped put aside their own personal safety and raced to the vehicle on fire and pulled the driver to safety. And whereas not long after the driver was pulled to safety, the vehicle was engulfed in flames. Whereas without the quick thinking and selfless act of bravery of Lewis Northup and the other Good Samaritan, the driver of the crashed vehicle would have suffered almost certain serious injury or death. Now, therefore, it be resolved, sorry, I get emotional, be resolved that the town council of the town of South Kingstown hereby commends Lewis Northup for his selfless and bravery and fearless disregard for his own safety to save the life of another. I think everybody should give him a standing ovation. Sorry, you made me cry. You did the best thing ever. Thank you. You did a wonderful job. Thank you. Thank you for what you've done.
Motion to approve item 14I.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I promise I won't cry anymore.
He doesn't mean it.
Oh, I feel so blessed. Okay, let's move on. Sorry about that, but we have wonderful people in this community. Moving on to item 6A, it's a resolution granting a victualler license to Davis Enterprises, DBA Davos Calzones and Wraps on Fortin Road, and application by David Armen Akin. Is anybody here to represent that business? Please come forward and state your name for the record.
David Armanakian.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Tell us a little bit about your restaurant and what your anticipation is.
It's going to be calzones, wraps, Mediterranean bowls, salads, and appetizers.
What will your hours of operation be?
About 11 to about 10 at night. And maybe Fridays, Saturdays open late because everybody else at that area does.
David, is this your first restaurant or
No, my third.
third? Okay.
Yep.
What are the other two?
Pizza places in North Providence and Warwick.
Nice.
Family business.
I make a motion that we approve item 6A.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any oppositions? Seeing none?
Good luck.
Good luck. Motion
Luck.
carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 7A, which is a public hearing for the purpose of reviewing and obtaining citizens' views on an application to designate the U.S. Route 1 within the Towers corporate boundaries as a Rhode Island scenic roadway. The purpose of this application is to protect the scenic resources within the U.S. Route 1 corridor. The primary focus of the application is to support higher standards of design and maintenance by the Rhode Island Department of Transportation. And I do see Chelsea is here, so Chelsea?
Excuse me, Meg, before you start, we did receive 3 communications that we need to just reference into the record.
Sure.
Emails, these are 3 in support of the application from Janet Innes, Jean Larson and Bernard Delude, and Mark Levitt.
Thank you.
Good evening. For those who are in the audience and might not know who I am, I'm Chelsea Seifert. I'm the town's planning director. This is a public hearing to consider submittal of an application to the State Scenic Roadway Board for designation of the entirety of U.S. Route 1 within the town's corporate boundary as a scenic roadway. The extent of the area under consideration, which is approximately 11 miles in length, is depicted in orange on the map. It is the entirety of the Route 1 corridor within South Kingstown. The scenic landscapes along U.S. Route 1 are diverse, and they provide a variety of natural and historic vistas. Some of the significant features include the historic Hannah Robinson Tower and Hale House, shown here. There's 2 monuments, William Jackson and Mager Meaden, that we're aware of. There's commercial farmland depicted here as Highland Farm. South County Commons is on Route 1. You have the Perryville Baptist Church. A variety of scenic vistas. There's some waterfront views. This is a Pond Street example. Historic and modern stone walls, and a variety of vegetation, both in the medians and along the shoulders. So to give a little history, the town first started considering designation of Route 1 in 1996, and they at that time submitted a application to the Scenic Roadways Board, who didn't take an action but recommended resubmittal. I understand that was because they wanted some additional information. The town didn't resubmit until 2003. For whatever reason, that didn't move forward. Again, resubmitted in 2005. And at that time, in 2005, a public hearing was conducted. But again, I understand that there was no decision at that time due to a lack of quorum from the Scenic Roadways Board, not due to any lack of intention to designate. So after that, we jumped to 2014, when the town council adopted the current comprehensive plan, which calls for the town to continue to pursue designation. In 2017, the planning board reinitiated discussion on the topic, and then really at the end of 2017 it came to fruition. In December 2017, the planning board considered adoption, but actually requested a recommendation from the EDC before they made a recommendation to you. The EDC reviewed it, provided a favorable recommendation, and then the planning board recommended that you consider the application in its entirety. And that brings us to tonight in March 2018 and your public hearing. Should the town council see fit to authorize submittal of the application, staff will submit the application as soon as possible. There will be a public hearing of the State Scenic Roadways Board, which we have tentatively scheduled for May 9th, and we scheduled it with the board so that we could send the date in the notice that we sent in, so that everyone would know what that date would be. And then if the State Roadways Board decides to designate, the town would initiate development of a stewardship plan for the corridor. So I think it's important to note what the designation will and will not do, so that everyone has a clear picture of this. Designation of US Route 1 in and of itself as a scenic roadway will have only one direct impact to the corridor itself. Upon designation, the Scenic Roadway Board will review all new RIDOT projects which occur within the RIDOT corridor. They will do that based on the contents of the stewardship plan and our desire to keep the visual character of the corridor. The only other thing that designation does is it requires us to then develop that stewardship plan. So if the State Scenic Roadways Board does designate, those are the two things that will happen automatically. Designation will not, in and of itself, create new regulations for abutting property owners. It won't change the permitted uses on abutting property, and it will not initiate any new RIDOT project, say a landscaping project or median project. It won't start any of those, but it might have an impact on those as they're implemented. So the purpose of the stewardship plan is to provide general guidance and recommendations to protect and preserve the scenic character of US Route 1. Once drafted, the plan will be provided for consideration and potential adoption by the town council. In order to guide and protect the scenic character of US 1, the plan will attempt to address design improvements within the boundaries of the state right-of-way, so those would be RIDOT-sponsored projects. It will address maintenance practices of things it wants RIDOT to do when performing maintenance. And it could also address potential changes to US Route 1 that could impact the roadway's scenic character, including abutting residential and commercial land uses and what regulations they are subject to. It will also address the roles and responsibilities of each unit of government, the state and the town, and other stakeholders with regard to stewardship. So most of the questions fielded by the planning department to date have been relative to bullet number 3 on the slide, or potential regulatory changes to abutting properties. Anticipating these concerns, the planning board discussed the potential contents of the stewardship plan at a work session in January. Sorry, go back. So during this work session, the board acknowledged that most of the land along the corridor is currently zoned residential, and that commercial uses would not currently be permitted except in the commercial zones. So areas in which commercial uses are currently permitted are depicted on the map in purple. So that includes the Route 1 Special Management District, highlighted here, and the neighborhood commercial at the intersection of Route 1 and 138. These two areas along Route 1 are the only places within the 11-mile stretch where commercial activity is permitted by right other than when associated with a farm use. Of note, neither of these commercial zoning districts currently allow big box style commercial, which has been a question that we've received. There are other uses along Route 1 which do contain commercial activity, such as the area where All Outdoors is. Those are considered non-conforming pre-existing uses and would not be allowed to, by right, redevelop into a different commercial use. Sorry, I'm trigger happy. So additionally, the board acknowledged that the Route 1 Special Management District currently includes a required 100-foot buffer from Route 1, which is intended to protect the scenic quality, so that wouldn't necessarily change. And the board acknowledged that there are already limitations on the size, number, type of freestanding signs that are allowed in commercial districts throughout town. So that was also something that was questioned.
Could I just ask you to repeat that section about the 100-foot buffer?
Sure. Within the Route 1 Special Management District currently, so that's the southern area in the circle, there is a required 100-foot buffer for all new development between the highway line and where you can put a building.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask you one other quick question?
Yeah.
You talked about All Outdoors as a different zoning, current use, non-conforming.
Yes.
If they were to go to sell that property at some point, are you saying that only a similar type of business could be there?
They could have the same use. So I'm not sure what the zoning enforcement officer what use code they would classify that as, but it has to remain the same use code.
Okay.
Because it's zoned residential, it is considered non-conforming. If they want to expand, they have to do it with a special use permit. And if they cease activity, they couldn't put a new commercial use there. Okay. So with those commercial limitations acknowledged, the planning board discussed what it might see as potential additional regulatory changes to abutting property. And those potential regulatory changes included limitation on the installation of invasive landscape species, requiring the protection of existing stone walls along the highway line on parcels proposed for development. They talked about requiring new major subdivisions and land development projects to preserve significant prominent view sheds, to provide some sort of increased setback, maybe similar to what's on Route 1 in the Special Management District now, and to limit the number of curb cuts or access drives.
Chelsea, I have a question. The bullet point about the existing stone walls along the highway. So if a property owner has an existing stone wall that's visible from the road, would this compel them to maintain it to a certain level, or would they have to change the way that they maintain that property?
So on designation, it wouldn't do anything. The stewardship plan would likely look at ways to preserve and better maintain stone walls, because that's considered a significant feature of the Route 1 corridor. So the details of that haven't been worked out yet. We have talked about, for new developments in other areas of town, we've talked about putting easements on the stone wall itself so it can't be taken down, because otherwise there isn't a protection of that feature.
I would just worry if the property owners would then have to change the way they maintain those walls, but we couldn't necessarily compel them to do that without this stewardship plan, correct?
Correct, and you could not compel them to do that, which I'll get to in a minute, without a regulatory change. The stewardship plan alone will not enforce any sort of regulation. It just sets it's sort of like the comprehensive plan, where it sets a vision for what they want to happen, and then you regulate it with other documents.
A guiding document, okay.
Right. And then the other thing that we talked about with the planning board was requiring an increased setback and potentially some sort of curved driveway instead of a straight shot driveway for new single-family homes. And relative to this, the board discussed setting the setback as a percentage of the total depth of the lot, so that you wouldn't ever end up with a lot that's not developed because it was too shallow. So coming up with maybe some kind of calculation for that. And those are the things that the board discussed as putting in the stewardship plan relative to private property. They did talk about telling DOT what to do with their projects pretty much all day, right? All day we'll tell DOT what to do. So, like I just mentioned, any of the regulatory changes would require a change to a regulation. So that means a public hearing, either before this body, the town council, or the planning board. A change to the zoning ordinance requires a public hearing before the council, and a change to the subdivision and land development regulations requires a public hearing before the planning board. And that is all I have for you. Happy to take questions.
Well, just a clarification. So the stewardship plan wouldn't necessarily create any new regulation. It would be, I guess you made the reference to the.
Yeah, it's basically a guiding document for what the town wants to see the future of that corridor look like. So the stewardship plan, from the Scenic Roadway Board's perspective, should outline what we want DOT to do. Right? We want the signage to look like this. We don't want so much signage within a certain area. We want the wire-type guardrails instead of the metal ones. So mostly it guides them. But it can also guide the town to tell the town what the public thinks should happen on that corridor. The planning board has discussed that plan would be created through a public process with direct outreach to abutters and other stakeholders. And then that plan, once drafted, would come to this body for adoption.
Chelsea, should this be approved or discussed for approval, what would be the time horizon for setting the wheels in motion for that designation and putting the parameters in place?
So we have tentatively scheduled the Scenic Roadway Board public hearing for May 9th. So at that time, the board would either choose to designate or not. If they chose to designate, we could start the stewardship plan process shortly thereafter, sometime this summer.
Were there any, has anyone reached out to your department regarding any major concerns, any of the businesses that are going to be affected?
I haven't had anyone come with a concern. Most of the business owners who have reached out to me, actually mostly developers who I am in contact with quite a bit, asking questions more than anything. And I think once we explain to them that the designation would not immediately impact any regulation, their concerns or their questions were addressed.
Would the plan make it easier for the town to apply for grants to do, I don't know, plantings of native plants or pollinator plants or something?
Yeah, I would say in general, any established adopted plan makes it easier for you to apply for a grant because you can show that it is the will of the town to have that project implemented. So it might, especially related to the transportation improvement program, if there were specific things we wanted to do, or they're resurfacing Route 1 now, if there were specific things relative to that, and we had the designation in place, then we could have maybe made suggestions on how they would do that differently.
Chelsea, does a scenic highway designation have any effect on home values?
I think the answer to that is unclear. Planning practice would tell you that the more rural an area, or the more scenic an area, the more people want to live there and the more the property values go up, but I have no data related to that.
Would you say that in one of the slides you referenced, if someone were to buy a property and want to do a new project, they would have to go to the Scenic Highway Board? Is that what you said?
Only DOT projects.
Oh, okay.
So no new commercial activity in town, no new residential activity would ever go to the Scenic Roadway Board. It would only be projects of RIDOT.
Excellent. Okay.
Right.
So a couple of things. One is in your data that you sent us, which was pretty extensive and very good. There's mention of, because of the inclusion within the CRMC SAMP region, much of the land located is already has more stringent regulations.
It does.
Could it be that this plan, stewardship plan, with if regulations came out of that, would be more stringent than what are there? I mean, I guess the answer, of course, is it could. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it could. So the special area management plan for the southern portion of the state mostly looks at the density of residential development. It gives standards for like OWTS, on-site wastewater treatment systems. I don't know that the stewardship plan would affect density. I don't know that it would say, you can only have half of the density. That's obviously all regulated by the zoning ordinance. I think it would more regulate the aesthetics of the new development from Route 1.
Right. And then I think it's my last question. We have Ministerial Road as a designated.
Yes,
So we have experience with it.
we do.
I've heard good and bad.
Me too.
I've heard from somebody who wanted to do a pretty minor addition on their home. They had to go through a lot of extra steps.
Yes.
The people who are required to put in what we're calling these sort of curved driveways so that you can't see the road from the house, they're not unhappy with that regulation, but there's some others. So
Yeah.
is that likely to happen here too for the residential side?
If I have anything to say about it, I would say no. The Ministerial Road Scenic Highway section of the zoning ordinance requires that all new single-family homes go through what we call development plan review, which is an arduous process for a single-family home.
Yeah.
I think on practice and implementing that regulation, we've seen multiple times where it's just unnecessary. And that is one of the things that we have been in discussions with the planning board about revising that language to no longer require that process unless there is some significant reason why it should be required. So I would say that no, the planning board is not necessarily looking to implement the same sort of regulation as Ministerial Road, in that practice shows that it is not currently effective.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Joe.
Once changes are made, can we correct any changes if they're not working properly?
You absolutely can. I mean, we amend the zoning ordinance all the time, right? So, Vin Murray, my predecessor, used to say that a zoning ordinance is never final, right? Because you can always change it back or change it to something different. And that's the sort of the beauty of a zoning ordinance is if it doesn't work, you can fix it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chelsea.
In the words of Vin Murray, to you, thank you. As this is a public hearing, I would like to ask anybody who would like to come up to the podium, please come up and state your name. If there are several people that would like to speak, we will curtail your comments to 3 minutes as a courtesy to somebody else who might be wanting to speak tonight. And certainly if we've gone through the gamut of speakers, you're welcome to come back up. But I'm going to ask, state your name and your address, please, and then we will limit your conversation right now to 3 minutes, and we can certainly open it up again.
Thank you. My name is Mark Goldberg. I own a home on Spartina Cove Road, and I'm also the developer of Spartina Cove over the last 20 years. When we developed Spartina Cove, we worked hard to preserve the scenic nature using stack walls, lay stack walls, and I have 3 questions. One, could the stewardship plan address new walls? I often see, at some great expense, new walls built that are just too formal and not in keeping with the rural character. A stack wall is more expensive to maintain, but they're cheaper to build. That's number 1. Number 2, would you have more interaction with DOT? Sometimes they come through and just cut down trees without any notification, and sometimes they're not really trees that are a problem. And other issues where they just act on their own behest. The third is a question about something that's not ambitious enough to me in the whole corridor, and that is that we have a bike path that goes from Wakefield to the Piers Beach. Why don't we have a bike path that goes to East Matunic Beach from Wakefield? It could easily be done off of Pond Street. Spartina Cove has miles of existing trails that it could use to cut back into Route 1 or come along Route 1 from Pond Street and then cut down Post Road. There are just 2 sections, a brief section there between Pond Street and Post Road, and then between Post Road and Jerry Brown Farm Road, probably 3/4 by Spartina of a mile by Spartina Cove, and about maybe 2/10 of a mile over by Jerry Brown Farm Road. With a minor investment, you could probably get people using our own beaches. by bicycle. And my question would be, would the stewardship and this plan with DOT limit the construction of any kind of bike paths along that corridor? And thanks for your guidance.
Thank you, Chelsea. Please, because we don't have the answers to some of these questions, and you might be more suited to that.
So the question, let's see, the stewardship can address new stone walls, yes. It will allow for more interaction with DOT. The stewardship plan in and of itself will guide DOT. If we don't like it, we change the stewardship plan, and the State Scenic Roadways Board would, abide by it. And then the stewardship plan would not preclude a bike path on Route 1. But that would be something to discuss as part of that process.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Rogers. I'm from the Westerly Community Credit Union. Our address is 4979 Tower Hill Road. We're not there yet, but we're in the...
But you're pretty close. It looks good.
We're getting there. And I just wanted to come and voice my support, voice the company's support of this plan. We've been looking at possibly adopting a spot, something like that, for the strip of land in front of where our business will be, and maybe even across the street. And this sounds like it'll go ahead and address some of those items and kind of clarify what can be done and help maybe create a deeper connection between the town and the DOT for those particular areas. And it is such a beautiful spot. We want to try to go ahead and keep it as such. So anyway, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lawson Durfee. I grew up on Main Street, and for the last 40-some years, I've lived on Route 1. And my only involvement in the town prior to this was 10 years on the Conservation Commission. So I know how many hours you guys put in for zero funding and zero money, and your time you have to put in is a lot. The founders of this country only wrote the Constitution with one primary goal, which was to protect us from an overreaching government. And I think this is just one more step, and you mentioned some on Ministerial Road where people have to go through an unnecessary, burdensome meetings, which not only puts a burden on them, it puts a burden on you folks and the other commissions and councils in town that you're doing for free. And I drive Route 1 multiple times every day, and I don't want to insult anybody, but it's not a scenic highway. It's just a 4-lane road. There's nothing on it. You get one view of Salt Pond and the tower, and that's the only thing that's scenic on that road. And I just think there's so many more important things in this town that you guys should be spending your time on than doing something like this. And I don't think, you put more regulations on the people, even though you say no, but when the time comes down to it, it's one more meeting, it's one more decision that a commission has to make somewhere along the way. A thankless, time that you guys put in. And I'm really against it, and in general, I'm against people overreaching, telling me what I can do with my property more than they already do, and I have no intention to do anything. I have one lot, and I live there, and I like it, and that's it. I'm opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Susan Rubinoff, and I live on 34 Allen Avenue. And for the last 30 years, it seems I come to the town council. My heart is racing to speak to all of you, but it's mostly about issues such as this. I'm a kindergarten teacher, and so I always have that picture in mind of what my children are going to be growing up into. And it's interesting that this is called the stewardship plan, because I feel like all of us are stewards of this environment. And I appreciate the gentleman that just spoke, but unfortunately we do need to have some guidelines that are given, because there are a small percentage of people that will do things for their own interest for money-making, whatever. And they don't have the bigger picture in mind of what are we leaving our children and our grandchildren. When I spoke to a number of people about this, they actually already thought that it was designated a scenic highway because it has come a number of times. And so I'm appreciative of you hearing this, and to please not just think of us right now, but think about my kindergartners who are going to be my age in 50 years. Thank you.
You're not that old, but thank you. Please, anybody else who would like to come forward and speak, state your name, and we'd love to hear from you.
Good evening. My name is Bob Vatava. I live on Post Road in Wakefield, and I'd like to compliment Chelsea for her very thorough perspective of this project that's been in the city, within the town. Undoubtedly, as Mr. Veely mentioned, we're acquainted with scenic roadways, with the ministerial road, which has been here for a good number of years. And in terms of regulations, the DOT also has regulations regarding signage within so many feet of their roads. So there are regulations already out there. And so basically what this is to try to maintain the beauty that exists in South County. We think of Providence and the areas up north as more of a densely populated metropolis. And so we come to the south to get a more rural feeling, which I believe is a statement in the comprehensive plan to maintain a rural quality. I thought I heard somebody say this. And just recently, Rhode Island got a lot of publicity. In fact, nationwide. In the Amtrak publication that's in every seat of every Amtrak train throughout the nation, they print 30,000 copies, 300,000 copies of this. In this particular issue, it's Rhode Island. A very, very nice article, 3 or 4 pages summarizing the economy of it, the qualities of living here, and going into the different areas, including South County. And as one gentleman, speaker mentioned, the bike path. So I think we've worked on this for a number of years. I think the idea is to protect the assets that we have. It's not to keep people from having the rights that they're entitled to as already written up in the zoning and so forth. It's to protect us. We have an economic development committee trying to encourage economic development in the area. But if we become visibly just anywhere America, why should they come here? So we've got a lot of assets here. I just hope that we can move forward with this and help protect them. So we would appreciate your leadership. By the way, Charlestown is already designated, and I hear through the grapevine that I think North Kingston would like to pursue this. So it could be quite a thoroughfare going from Westerly all the way up north. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Anybody else would like to come up? Please come up now.
Hi. My name is Hope Leeson, and I live actually on Ministerial Road. And I wanted to provide a little bit of perspective for that process and how it might inform the process for Route 1. Going back to 1960-something, there was a lot of effort to preserve Ministerial Road because the state at that time was considering straightening it and flattening it and widening it. And that process continued into the 90s when it finally, I forget in my time frame when the actual designation was, but the reason for really pushing to designate it was so that it couldn't become a major corridor from Route 1 up to URI, and literally the plans were to take out the hills and to straighten the road and to widen it. And that was not something that the residents that lived on Ministerial Road wanted to see. And I think looking at Route 1, Route 1, as Topper was saying, is a 4-lane road, and it certainly isn't the road that it used to be in some regards, but it could be wider and it could be straighter. And when you consider the traffic coming down on beach days and the push from people that live in the city to make that a wider, more efficient access to beaches, I think if we want to preserve and want to make a statement that it's important to us to have as much beauty as we have maintained at this point, then it's an important thing to endorse. Thank you.
Hi, David Flanders on Curtis Corner Road. I'm also the chair of the Conservation Commission. I just wanted to address a couple of points that had come up for discussion here. First of all, we at the Concom do get review over these applications, residential applications, on Ministerial Road. And some of them are just caught in the legal language where it says, for instance, we don't want to have garage doors facing the road. It detracts from the scenic quality. Well, in the last 2 months, we've had 2 applications where the house was 800 feet inboard. And so it was a specious question, but it did have to be addressed because it was there. And we dispensed with that in 2 minutes. And we made that application the first one on the agenda just to accommodate the homeowner who had to do this. And like I said, they were just caught in the legal language, but we dealt with it. And I can tell you, as a member for the last 12 years, we don't mind doing that. This is not a burden for us. I mean, we don't get paid anything, but it's what we feel is right. And it's part of stewardship, again, of, in this case, Ministerial Road. And regarding the scenic benefits of Route 1, I would argue that it's not just what Chelsea beautifully highlighted that we saw in the slides. It's the community forest that is South Kingstown. We watch these things change colors every season. This is a draw. And Route 1 itself is a draw to all the traffic that we have to deal with in the summertime. People are coming down here for a reason, and those are also economic benefits. To attract these people here, to spend their dollars here, they're willing to put up with being stuck in that traffic. As an independent, self-employed person, I can work my schedule where I don't get caught up in that traffic. But they can't, and they put up with it, and they do it because they want to be here, because this is a beautiful place. And it's not just the specific items that you see down the highway. It is the community forest corridor. And so if we can grant that community forest any further protection where we're getting deforested every month, so much the better. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion from the audience? Any discussion? Oh.
Hey. My name is Martha Bradley. I'm the owner, co-owner, if he was here, of Highland Farm. And I think the scenic highway is a good idea. My only gripe about this scenic highway, and you're talking about people coming down from Providence or Connecticut, New York, we get all kinds of people there at the farm, is how can you have a scenic highway when you're traveling 60 and 70 miles an hour down that road? And I'm telling you, I've had more accidents in front of my farm than any other place on that highway. So I think something has to be done about the speed on that road to be a scenic highway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Murray Gates, 17 Briar Lane in Kingston. I agree with Mr. Durfee, who objected to the scenic highway, insofar as anytime there's new regulation, we have to be very careful that our government doesn't overstep our personal rights. However, in this particular case, I think the benefit that is derived through this scenic highway ordinance or program, followed by the stewardship plan, far outweighs any potential inconvenience to our personal rights. So I approve and I agree of the concept, and would look very much forward to the discussion around the stewardship plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Judy Taft, and I live on Commodore Perry Highway, the proposed scenic highway. And when I was I've lived there all my life, and when I was about 12, my father was told by the government that they were going to take by eminent domain part of our land to build this 4-lane highway, which had always been Post Road. So 25 acres, for which we were given a check for $500, went through, and we have this really big highway now. And I have lived there all my life, and I've seen what it's done to have that big highway, and I don't think it would benefit anybody who lives in our beautiful area to have a bigger highway or to have it look more like Cranston than like South County. I really believe that we have a special, special place and that we need to preserve it and to steward it. Thank you.
Who wishes to speak tonight? Chelsea, is there anything else you'd like to add? Not that I'm putting you on the spot, I'm just asking.
I will put you on the spot. I have another question about there are some traffic conditions on Route 1 with the red lights and the jug handles and all that sort of thing. And I'm sure when the volume of traffic increases, and probably not if, but when, and those need to be changed to a different sort of traffic calming or traffic control measure, is there likely to be a detriment to having the scenic designation?
I think the answer to that is that DOT will always do what is necessary to protect life safety and welfare, just like we will. And so if a solution that is necessary conflicts with the stewardship plan, they will do what is necessary.
Okay.
It should also note that DOT has conducted a road safety audit of Route 1 between Saugatucket Road and South County Commons, and we are just recently in receipt of that road safety audit, and so there may be some things coming out of that in terms of safety for that area where Highland Farm is, just to address that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Chelsea, I just want to understand, based on the conversation, I apologize, I forgot your name, and I know you live on Commodore Perry Highway. There would be no intentions to expand the highway to additional lanes, or if there was something to come up in the future, how would that be addressed if this were designated as a scenic highway?
So in the stewardship plan, the town can express its desire to not have Route 1 expanded.
And that is the expectation, correct?
If that is what is discussed as part of the development of the stewardship plan, then it would end up in the stewardship plan for your consideration prior to adoption. The planning board so far has not discussed whether that statement makes sense or should be included in the stewardship plan, but if the town sought it fit to do that, to put that in, then it could be in there.
I don't know if that's right or wrong. I'm just asking based on some of the comments.
Yeah, I mean, we could include that for, certainly in the plan, that we like the 2 lanes in each direction. We like that it's, curves with the landscape. All of those things could be addressed in the plan. It just hasn't been discussed to date.
Any additional questions from you?
I think there might have been someone in the audience.
My name's Meredith Arcaro. I live at 30 Bayfield Drive in this town. You're talking about from Saugatucket to South County Commons?
No, from the entire length of Route 1.
Okay, well, they were mentioning Saugatucket to South County Commons.
That was it sounds like a traffic study.
Okay, well, what about the traffic study from South County Commons down to the Government Center, where they're building a big, huge hotel right now next to Bradley School?
Are you looking to see what the data is behind that? Or?
Oh, well, I'm saying, that we're going to talk about a lot more traffic with a big, huge hotel right there across from the Government Center. There's already a hotel in South County Commons. We have the Holiday Inn, and now they're building a big hotel. Like, do you know how big that hotel is?
100 rooms.
And that's going to be a lot more traffic on Route 1.
I don't know if, Chelsea, you want to speak to the plans on that at all, but...
I mean, I think a lot of the people don't know there's going to be a new hotel there, right next to Bradley School.
So a hotel has been approved at the intersection of Hampton Way and Route 1, which is the entrance to Wakefield Meadows. It's 100 rooms, approved by the planning board in the fall. A traffic study was done as part of that approval, which showed that the traffic study is really relative to the intersection more than the traffic on Route 1, and the impacts to the surrounding area, specifically to Wakefield Meadows. The traffic study did not show that any improvements were necessary to the intersection itself, and DOT approved anytime you make a change to a use that is accessed onto US Route 1, DOT has to approve it through a physical alteration permit or an alteration to an existing physical alteration permit, and DOT approved that for the hotel. Also for 2 subsequent phases, which are yet to be determined. So the traffic impact study as part of that were, like I said, relative to the intersection, not to the overall traffic volume on Route 1.
Chelsea, what happens if the Scenic Roadways Board again becomes sort of dysfunctional, can't make quorum? Does it have any impact on?
It wouldn't be designated. We could keep trying
Let's
until
say they
get
stay
a quorum.
active enough for us to actually get the designation.
Yes.
Then fall into the same state.
I think the chair of the Scenic Roadways Board might actually be in the audience. Mike DeLuca might have a better explanation for, as I understand it, Mike's here. He's used to being put on the spot. I like Mike to talk to this because, as I understand it, the Scenic Roadways Board reviews Route 1 projects, and if I don't know procedurally from their history, if they can't get a quorum to do that, what would happen? So maybe Mike can address that. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mike DeLuca. I live in Narragansett, and I am the chairman of the Scenic Roadway Board. I came here purely to observe tonight.
You thought.
Put you on the spot.
So, what I can tell you about the Scenic Roadway Board and its mustering of a quorum is that we've been working very diligently to make certain that all the seats are filled. We've recently had, as recently as last week, had a seat filled. The governor has a certain number of appointments, as do Grow Smart Rhode Island and the Rhode Island Builders Association. So, along with DOT, DEM, and the State Historic Preservation and Heritage Commission. So all these organizations have an interest. It would do them well to make certain that their seats are filled. I'm a public appointee, so we have been in place and active since 2009. We've reviewed since that time, I'm going to guess and say 25, 30 applications, mostly for amendments to roadways. This is the first new designation that we will be considering, and we're looking very much forward to giving it its fair public review and hopefully designation. But back to Councilman Collins' concern, we work very closely, I've worked very closely with members of the governor's staff to fill positions when people do retire from the board.
Just one follow-up. How has the relationship been between SRB and DOT? Do they listen to you guys well, or?
Yes. In fact, as I mentioned, DOT has a designee on the board, and their landscape architecture staff is our staff also. So we have a really great conduit for communication, a couple conduits for communication with the RIDOT staff. We have had some very interesting discussions about improvements that are proposed, not only in South County, but all over the state. The nature of the type of guardrails that are going to be installed in the Charlestown section has been heavily discussed. Something as simple as the fencing, the guardrail and fencing, the signage and guardrails in Bristol on Hope Road, down in the center of town, a very congested area, and that is a designated roadway. And even something as simple as reorientation of a driveway entrance for a public facility, a fire station, on one of our designated roads, Ministerial Road. So we've had great conversation about the relationship between safety, which Ms. Seifert mentioned a couple times, and the aesthetic value of the roadway corridor in question. Hope Road in Bristol is a whole different world than Route 1 in Narragansett or Ministerial Road. I said Narragansett, sorry. It's stuck in my head. Route 1 in South Kingstown. So we take context into question, and we work closely with the RIDOT staff. There are times when we push them, there are times when they push us, but we always find a way to a middle ground.
Anything else? Mike? Any other comments here? Please come forward. State your name. Although we all know you. We're happy.
I wasn't going to speak, Meg. I wasn't. Leslie Schwannard, 9 Emmett Lane in Peacedale. I really wasn't going to speak tonight, but I couldn't help it. I just looked at this audience, and I know sometimes you have a lot of people here, sometimes you have 3 or 4 people here. Well, tonight, I think as we look out, I think we know the sentiment of most of the people here. We've waited a long time to even discuss this, as a lot of you know, and as Chelsea has pointed out. So I am for the designation. Obviously, a lot of people here wouldn't be here if they didn't have to be, but they have the concern about this highway. And I think David Flanders said it very apropos too, that it also improves economic development. I mean, think about it. How many of you people are here, live in this town? Why? Why do you live in this town? I mean, I've been living in this town for 46 years. I came from Pawtucket, and the last council we had, a lot of people came from Pawtucket who sat on the council. So why do we choose to live here? And why do we come to these meetings and speak, or come to these meetings and fight various causes? Because we want to see this place not necessarily stop progress, but do it in such a way that people want to come here. That's all I have to say, and I really wasn't going to say anything. Thank you.
But Leslie, we're always glad when you do, because you are a great part of this community. Yeah, you are. Do we have any other comments from anybody in the audience? Because certainly it's your time to talk, and we value your opinions, for sure.
Hi, my name is Laura Wilcox. I grew up on Route 1. I'm a resident of Richmond right now, but I am a property owner of the property of Highland Farm named Martha, and my brother owned the actual business, but I speak for the other 3 children that actually own the land and the houses there. I'm in favor of protecting our scenic highway, but I am also very fearful, as has been stated, having the language and restrictions put on property owners that would be owning land right along Route 1. I wouldn't want the government or the language to put restrictions on and make it a hardship for the people that own that property, and for them, as they are moving forward, to be able to use their property and the financial responsibility that it takes to keep beautiful rolling acres there. We all can think that's a beautiful thing, but there is a financial responsibility that goes with that. And so I would just caution you, as if you lock us into language that would make it a hardship for those people that own that land, moving forward, if they're tying their hands, if they're trying to do something going forward with that land, that you would lock them into something that they wouldn't be able to do. And so I just caution you having more restrictions, more languages that would do that to them. And that would be my thought.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Anybody else?
My name is Karina Burston. I live in Wakefield, and in general, I concur with most of the people in favor of the highway. I think it's a great. It will add to the economic development of the town. It's basically. I come from a business background, and it's basically a branding statement, and it allows the developers who are there to be certain that they are going to remain in a rural community, in a tourist community, rather than growing up on having businesses grow up around them like Bald Hill Road. So I'm in favor, but I did have one question, and this is, if we designate it as a scenic highway, can we get the Narragansett salt shed altered or made into a better building?
I think this is just for South Kingstown, unfortunately.
Any other comments, any other questions, any other concerns, or anybody willing to or want to get up and speak? I see somebody coming up.
My name is Marjorie Stevens, and I live in Highland Avenue. So this last comment about the salt shed, like, you can't take that away. You know, it's there. So once businesses and, you know, the booming happens, it's there. You can't take it away. So you have to be really mindful what you want. You know, you can't go back. That's all I want to say.
I would just like to expand on some of the thoughts that have been expressed. First of all, the salt shed comes forward. I think the thing that South Kingston as a town can be quite proud of is that we're concerned with what goes on in terms of DOT projects, etc., as compared to, for example, Narragansett. I'll give you an example. The intersection where the gas station is, Kingstown Road goes into goes south and so forth, so forth. I went into Narragansett, into their Public Works Department, and asked if I could see the plans for that improvement at that intersection. I was told, "No, that's a DOT project. We don't get involved with that." If you know our Public Works Department, they have plans of everything that goes on. The same thing occurred with the salt shed coming forth. I went into Narragansett. There's that little piece there on Route 1 is Narragansett. And asked to see the plans for the salt shed, landscaping, etc. Oh no, that's a DOT project. We don't. So again, I think we appreciate all your help, but a lot of the leadership that's going to come forth for a scenic highway will certainly come from our town manager, as he maintains a very strong political with DOT, as well as our governor, who, as you know, likes this area quite well, and she spends a lot of time at her vacation house down here in South Kingston. So if we need a little assistance that maybe DOT isn't quite in alignment, we can maybe, kind of work together to achieve what we need.
I like your subtle forte. It's wonderful, Bob. Thank you. Do we have anybody else who would like to come up and speak tonight? Any other comments here at the table or on the floor?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Public hearing is closed. To move on, then, do we?
I will make a motion. Do we make a motion to submit to the Scenic Roadway Board our application for designation?
I'll second with a couple of comments. Yeah, wait. No.
Thank you. We're actually gonna make a motion, so if I could, everybody who's going to leave or to kind of keep conversations down.
Okay, so you have a motion and a second.
You do have a motion and a second, and you have a.
I felt pretty strongly from 3 or 4 years ago when this issue first came to us that the abutters along Route 1 were involved in the process, and I feel that we've done a really good job to get the word out to those abutters, and the proof is in that a lot of them were here tonight and engaged. So my main concern from the beginning was that the people who were going to be impacted the most were in on the process. I'm satisfied that they have been. They need to stay involved, though, for the next steps in this process, because that's when conditions that you may think is overreach from the government may get implemented. So I'm happy that they were invited. I'm happy that they showed up and contributed. I want them to stay involved because I think I'm in favor of the motion that's on the table, but I think going forward we have to be careful that any regulations that we make are not going to negatively impact those abutters.
I just had a couple of comments, too. I think that, to just sort of echo what Joe said, that we have done a really good job of sort of letting the abutters know and trying to involve them in the discussion, and it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity for that in the future with this the stewardship plan. I think that it sounds like we've learned a lot from the experience with ministerial, so I think some of the concerns that came up about over-regulating and making the property owners sort of jump through hoops for minor improvements on their homes could be addressed. It sounds like we know that we had some overreach, and we're going to fix that. I think that our boards and commissions are, pretty fluid in town. We make appointments all the time. People resign, and it's not always enough to just hope that things stay the same or stay the way that we want them to. I think it speaks to what our town values, that Route 1 has maintained its sort of scenic properties all these years without the scenic highway designation. I think that shows that the people we appointed to those boards and the people that live in the community wanted it that way. So I think having this designation is a guiding document to say this is what we want it to look like in the future. And, you know, I just have this vision of when I was younger coming home from the city, and there's just a sort of like a sense of stillness when you hit that highway right like around North Kingstown, where it just opens up and it's quiet, and you know, you don't get the lights, you don't get the signs, and that was always a marker for me. Oh, we're getting close to home. So I'd be really excited to see this go into place and just know that my kids will have that same sort of calm when they enter South Kingstown. So I'm in favor of this also.
I have to agree with the two sentiments that I've just heard. I think it's important that we continue with the integrity that we expect in this town. I think we have all come here to live here. I didn't grow up here, but I did my whole life in Summers, and I moved here in 1980. And I'm also on the Pawtucket line. But that's so irrelevant. I guess my biggest concern is I think it's very important to keep with the integrity of this town, and I think the designation is important to this town. I guess the one thing that I'm not going to task Chelsea to do, because she's only one person, is that we continue to have a say with the DOT in terms of how the maintenance and ongoing issues have to occur on scenic Route 1, and that's a very difficult task when dealing with DOT. However, the gentleman that came up certainly said that there's a lot of involvement, and I would hope to see that progressively continue. Any other comment?
I just want to address Leslie. I'm here because I met a girl.
Oh, see. We're transplants, I guess. Any other questions, comments? The public hearing is closed. We have a motion. We have a second. We've had a couple of comments. If there are no other comments, it's time to go on to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any oppositions or anybody recuse or abstain? Seeing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 8A, which is communication dated March 9th from the Gloucester Town Council requesting support of House Bill H7501 and Senate Bill S2419 for the implementation of in-person early voting is received, and how would we further like to direct?
I make a motion that we put communication 8A on file.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any oppositions or abstentions? Seeing none, moving forward to B, a communication dated March 8th from the Warwick City Council requesting support of legislation to eliminate the expiration of the Foreclosure Mediation Act. That is received and placed on file, and further directive is as follows.
I also make a motion that we put item 8B on file.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item number E, Mr. O'Neill is not able to be here, so we ask that this be tabled to the next council meeting. So I would ask for a motion to move this item forward, place it on file, move it forward, and we'll further discuss.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item number H is a resolution adopted by South Kingstown School Committee on March 16th in support of a provision of House Bill H7200 that would provide for a referendum question on the November ballot in authorizing $250 million in bonds to renovate existing and construct new schools in support of H7696 and Senate Bill S2181, resolutions that would provide for a question on the November ballot to amend Article, I don't even know what, 12, thank you, of the Rhode Island Constitution regarding the fundamental right to public education. Received, placed on file, and further directive is as follows.
I'll make a motion to approve sending this resolution.
Wait a second.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Seeing none, motion carries. Moves us to item number 9, comments from interested citizens. If anybody is in the audience who would like to come up and speak, now is the time to do this, and please state your name for the record.
Murray Gates from 17 Briar Lane. I'm sorry, was this comments in general, or was this regarding...
Comments in general.
Comments in general.
So I wanted to ask tonight in regards to the Saugatucket plan. Will Green's landscape architecture class put together some recommendations, which I thought were excellent. And too often we've had cooperation from the university, and specifically landscape architects who come and we disregard the recommendations. In this particular case, I think the planning board and the town council responded very quickly to look for some short wins and see what we can do to leverage some of those recommendations. My caution is around expending any funds to some of the deeper projects that were recommended. And I know nobody stepped up and said, yeah, let's do this yet, and let's commit certain funds. However, there's something that I think we need to take a look at before we spend any of the taxpayers' money, and that is potentially investing in a hydrologic and hydraulic study. So going back to this very large event of 2010, a little bit of background before I get into that. Business owners and residents over the course of the last couple of decades have spent millions of dollars, literally millions of dollars, recovering from storm events. As a family that owns one small building on the river with 1,000 square feet of space that has been impacted several times, to the extent that we've paid in claims or we've submitted claims in excess of $100,000 for 1,000 square feet. And you multiply that by all of the people that own property up and down the river that gets flooded, whether that be the town's Peacedale office building, whether it be Technical Industries, Riverbend, the bank block, what used to be Damon's, South County Orthopedics, all of these buildings continuously get flooded. And coming out of 2010, where I left off, there was discussion with the town manager at that time of conducting some hydrologic studies, because this is what's really required before we do anything serious in terms of investing in flood mitigation. The only thing that came out of Will Green's study around flood mitigation was perhaps building what do you call it? Is Chelsea still here? An amphitheater, yes. And although well-intended, an amphitheater would probably encompass or take up about 3 minutes worth of flow in a storm event. So there really was nothing serious proposed in terms of flood mitigation. And that was listed as maybe one of 3 or 4 principal objectives of looking at the Saugatucket River. So when you miss completely one of the top objectives, I think you need to take a step back and say, what can we really do about flood mitigation? Because our community, a good part of our commercial center, specifically with Palisades Mill, which probably has over, I'd say, 30,000 or 40,000 square feet, which is rendered not useless but close to it because it is subject to floods. We really have to, we owe the town, we owe the property owners some type of investment in researching what we can do seriously to mitigate those floods. So that's my recommendation here. It's, number one, to commend you on adopting many of the recommendations coming out of the Saugatucket plan, and number two, to suggest going slowly in terms of investing anything before you really understand the nature of the river and where we're going with future storm events. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else who would like to come up and speak on behalf of the audience? Now's your time to do so. Okay. Let's move on then to item number 11, which is the town manager's report.
I'm going to keep this short and mic'd tonight. going to try to actually be heard. Really, the only thing I want to report on that is current and ongoing is the fact that DOT has started construction down on Route 1 between East Matunic and Charlestown. Folks should be aware of that construction and allow time in the morning and in the evening to get where they're going. I also wanted to tonight, though, very briefly, because we've had a lot of discussion in recent meetings about zoning regulations, and the roles and responsibilities around zoning. I wanted to just share with you and with the public who might be here a sense of how the processes work here in South Kingstown. They're not unlike the processes elsewhere, and there's really three buckets. There's the legislative, the adoption of the rules component of our zoning process. And that really starts with someone saying, hey, I've got an idea about what zoning should be. I think that zoning should be allowed in this part of town for commercial uses, or zoning for residences ought to have these characteristics. Those proposals come to the town council, and the town council sets the zoning regulations. They do that by referring that to other bodies for input and advice. But once the rule becomes the zoning regulation, it moves over to an administrative process. That process is described in the second column, and that's really a process where an applicant looks at the rules and say, okay, the rule says I can or cannot do X or Y, or I can do X or Y under these circumstances. They make an application to apply the rule in their particular case, in their particular development, to the planning board. The board makes a decision, and that decision then becomes binding on the applicant, and it becomes binding on the community. It becomes binding on the town. That then is handed off to the zoning enforcement official, who will review the plans that are submitted for construction, or review complaints that come in from citizens, will really look at anything that comes to the zoning official's awareness. He drives by and he sees something that doesn't look right. He'll investigate and make a determination. That decision or that notice of violation then goes back to the applicant, who has to come into conformity with our rules. If they don't come into conformity, we end up in our adjudicative process. The adjudication of particular controversies is handled by essentially the the zoning board of review here in South Kingstown. So what we end up with is the zoning enforcement official or another person will make a decision that is a decision related to the application of our zoning. A person says, that's not right, you shouldn't have made that decision, and that person becomes the appellant, who will file a formal appeal with our zoning board of review, and the zoning board of review will have a public hearing, will apply the rules, and give a decision on what happened here, whether the appellant was correct or incorrect. They issue a formal decision, and that formal decision becomes binding on both the individual property owner, the appellant, and the town, unless either the property owner or the town appeals to the courts. My point in pointing all of this out is that these things need to be kept separate. The applicants, the proponents of new ideas, the appellants from a decision that has been made, all have to stay in their lanes, and we can't mix these things up as we go forward. We've had a lot of discussion here over the last several months now, where we want to take sort of an appeal to the administrative body, the planning board, or we want to take an appeal to the town council or the town manager. Really, when we're talking about a decision that is made by the zoning official, it's his discretion that gets deference, and it's not really up to me or anyone else in the town government to step in and say, you're wrong. If that decision is reasonable, it's entitled to deference. And again, I'm sure we'll have opportunities for talking about this again, but I thought it was important to just sort of spell out those three lanes. And with that, I'll end my report.
Thank you very much. On to you.
Yeah, so other than to say that I couldn't agree more with the tutorial that Rob just brought us through with regard to this three-part business. The only thing I'd add is that there's timing involved with a lot of things, whether it's the public hearing timing, the judicial appeal timing, et cetera. And it is a very open, transparent process. It's what makes our democracy great, I guess. Other than that, I really have nothing to add unless you have some questions.
Mike, I actually did have a quick question, or just a comment, really. We were talking in the work session before you got here. I had a few people reach out to me and ask me about amending our charter in regards to the school committee appointments.
Okay.
And Rob's going to get us some information on that in his report next week. But I was just wondering what the cutoff is for submitting that to the General Assembly.
You know, municipal bills can literally be submitted up until the last day. However, my rule of thumb is the sooner the better, because you never know what's going to happen as things go on. But unlike other bills that have a February cutoff, we are not subject to that.
Okay, and I'm not
we have time.
suggesting that that's where we go, just for I know how to tell somebody when they
But a
ask me.
charter change would not require legislation. It
That have to go to the voters?
that would be you would make a decision as a council as to whether or not you want to propose to the voters a change to the charter. Then it would go on the ballot in November. And so you'd have to back up with the Secretary of State's office. Any ballot initiative probably needs to go in sometime in August, but we'd have to look at that.
Oh, okay. I guess I was thinking about a couple years ago when we did the change for the town council in the special elections. I thought we submitted that.
No.
That was the Secretary.
We do that if, in fact, the voters approve it, then it goes to the General Assembly for a ratification process.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
And I don't want to have a long conversation. I want this to be short and brief. But I did bring a question to the town manager, Rob, and for clarification for Mike. And in any designations we decide to allocate as funds to any nonprofit or organizations in this town, my question was indemnification. If there was, it doesn't matter the organization. That's not my concern. But if we could look at it like if somebody walked down the street and they got hurt on a town property, they could sue us. But if we're allocating funds to these organizations in our town, and we designate or they designate those funds for a specific purpose, and there is something that happens, could we be held liable for that?
Well, I think in this world you can always.
Well, I know. That's why we don't like lawyers.
So
except for you, Mike.
Because we love you.
Well, there are the PI lawyers, and then there are the rest of us. But anyhow, well, first of all, any lawsuit brought against the town is we have coverage through Rhode Island Interlocal Trust. But that aside, many times, like for instance, when someone does a road race, or perhaps even in the example that you use, we require that they add us as an additional insured to their policy. So that certainly can happen, sort of a double protection.
Is that something that we would do or that would cost us more money? Because I'm not looking to do that. I just know that when we do have road races, we have to hold hold liable policy,
Yes.
and
or whenever the individual organizations use town facilities, we do the same thing. Those they're called riders. They're generally inexpensive.
So I just brought it up. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the right thing to do is, but I guess we'll just go from there. I don't know.
We always monitor those things and require insurance whenever there's exposure to the town.
Okay.
Meg, were you asking more specifically towards the outside agencies that we gave funding to, or?
Yes, because there are times that we then go and volunteer for those agencies. Like, there's no specific examples that I really want to name, but we're giving allocated dollars to outside agencies who might want to do specific things that we're giving them money to do or to acquire, whether it be any of them. It could be any of them. And I wanted to make sure if we're giving them money for specific purposes and something happens with the purpose that those dollars are to be spent, that they cannot come back to the town. And hold the town responsible because we gave them money for X, Y, Z. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know.
Both Mike and I are lawyers. I'm a trained attorney and paranoid because of it. And this is a sort of thing that I do worry about. It is important when we have a fact pattern, when we have a set of circumstances that might give rise to an allegation that we were in the planning or that we were involved in the event in some meaningful way, that we protect ourselves. And Mike's exactly right. You do that by ensuring that you're identified as an additional insured party. And again, Mike routinely does it with road races and events of that sort. We, I think, do need to look into other grant-making situations where it may also be appropriate. And we'll do that because we have to protect the town and the town's interests.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring up a can of worms, but I went home and I was reading through what we decided to allocate as funds, and there were 2 or 3 examples, and I was like, oh my gosh, if this organization uses this for this, could we be responsible if somebody, because I'm not a lawyer, but there were a couple of examples, and I don't want to bring them up here because I don't want to pinpoint the organizations, but there were a couple that we agreed to fund that designated how they wanted to spend their money. And then when I went home and really sat down, that's when I contacted Rob and you, Mike, for a legal opinion. And I said, could we be held responsible because we're approving funds that are designated for X, Y, and Z without an indemnification clause or looking at a liability policy, or that was, I mean, not that that's going to, hopefully not that that's going to happen. I just want to make sure we're protected as well as the people that we're providing funds to go on and do good things within the community. That's what we're here for. Okay, I'm sorry. That's my ABCs. That's all if there's nothing else, we can move on to new business.
There's an appointment.
Oh, yes.
Stephanie Osborne does not wish to be reappointed to the Zoning Board of Review. So I think I'd make a resolution to appoint Thomas Daniels, who's the alternate number 1, to be a full member, and also to move Michael Henry to alternate number 1. And then if we can advertise for that vacancy for the alternate spot on the Zoning Board of Review.
Second.
Great.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Also, can we just, I don't know if we have already, but if we could send a letter of gratitude to Stephanie Osborne.
Stephanie's been up for a long time. That would be great. Ready to move on? 14A is a resolution authorizing an award of bid to South County Umpires Association in Charlestown for a 4-year contract for umpire services in accordance with bid specifications for the per-game price of $58 for 2 officials, $29 for 1 official, and this is in effect through November of 2019 and 60/30 from April 2020 through November 2021. And this has been described in a memorandum from the Director of Leisure Services in a memorandum dated March 16th. Do we have any conversation on this?
Motion to approve item 14A as presented.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any oppositions? Seeing none, motion carries. We'll move to item G, which is a resolution authorizing an award of contract to Applied Biosystems, which is located in West Kingstown, for consulting services to develop open space management plans for the Noise Farm property in an amount not to exceed $19,801, and as further described in a memorandum from the Planning Director dated March 15th, a recommendation on award of contract for consulting services to develop open space management at the Noise Farm property. Any discussion?
Motion to approve item 14G as presented.
All those in favor? Aye. Any oppositions? Seeing none, motion carries. that should be the end. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Meeting is adjourned officially at 9:05.